sold like livestock by her own mother. Then the Apache gave her the family she never had. They had sold her the way you sell a calf at market, and the one who set the price was not some trader passing through. It was her own mother. In 1892, a small town called Willow Pass sat along the new railroad line cutting across the Arizona territory. Dust and the clatter of metal were the two things that never seemed to run out. At the far end of Main Street stood a boarding house with a small stockyard where cattle buyers usually gathered their herds before loading them onto the train. That morning, there were no cattle in the yard, only an old wagon, a heavy-set, middle-aged man, and a young woman with fair hair tied back at the nape of her neck. Her hands clasped so tightly together that her knuckles had gone white. Her name was Eliza Hartley, 22 years old. Her father had been a carpenter, dead now after a winter bout of pneumonia. Since then, her mother, Martha, talked about money in the same tone other folks used when talking about rain. If it did not come, you died. If it came too hard, it washed everything away. "Mr. McCready is a decent man," Martha said, fingers squeezing a thin, worn leather purse. "He has a ranch, a house, hired hands. You marry into that, you will not starve." "Eliza is not a cow for him to pick out." Eliza had said that once, her voice shaking but clear. Martha had looked at her the way you look at a child who cannot do simple sums. "You are not a cow," she answered. "But if I cannot settle this debt, they will come for everything, even the bed you sleep in. A widowed woman with a grown daughter. No money, no land. In Willow Pass. Where exactly do you think you can go?" Eliza had no answer. In the years since her father died, she had worked as a maid, a seamstress, cleaning rooms at the boarding house, and all of that was just enough to buy flour and a little coffee. The number written at the bottom of the storekeeper's ledger, the one that said how much they owed, she had never even seen. Mr. McCready, the man waiting in the yard, was close to 50. His beard grew thin and patchy, and the smell of tobacco and horse sweat clung to him. He was studying the front hoof of his horse with a kind of attention Martha had never spent on Eliza's worn-out shoes. "Eliza is a good girl. She can work," Martha said, trying to smile. "She is a bit quiet, but she listens." Eliza stood a few steps away, eyes on the ground. Ever since she had learned that the agreement was as good as done, she had stopped arguing. Inside her, there was a hollow space, wide and cold, like the cut of ground left behind where the railroad had been dug through. McCready straightened up and looked her over the way a man looks at a horse, not crude, just out of habit. "She know how to ride?" he asked. "Yes," Martha answered quickly. "Her father taught her. She rides gentle, not like those boys in town." Eliza heard that, and for a moment, wanted to laugh. Rides gentle. That, apparently, was her finest selling point, in her mother's eyes and in the storekeeper's ledger. "The money is with Jenkins already," McCready said. "You can pick it up at the store. As for the girl, I will take her today. It is a long way back to the ranch." Eliza lifted her head for the first time. "You did not say anything to me last night," she said slowly. Martha avoided her daughter's eyes. "If I had told you, you would have cried, begged, said things I did not have the courage to hear," she said, her voice stiff to hide the trembling. "Better to say it this morning. Eliza, this is the only way we do not lose everything. You go with Mr. McCready, you will have a roof and a plate of food. I have done my part." "Your part," Eliza said softly, "or the price on me." McCready coughed, as if he meant to shorten the conversation. "Girl, you will eat well and sleep in your own bed," he told her, his tone a little less rough. "On my ranch, no one beats women. I need a housekeeper, a wife to see to things. I am not some drunk in the saloon." Eliza looked at him and saw a man who was not cruel exactly, but who clearly did not see her as anything more than necessary. She thought of all the nights she had lain awake, listening to the train grind past and imagining herself aboard it, going somewhere far away. Now, it turned out her first journey out of town would be on the wagon of a man who had paid money to her mother. She turned back toward Martha. "What if I say I will not go?" she asked. Martha bit her lip. For just an instant, Eliza saw the raw fear in her mother's eyes. Fear of the letters demanding payment, of being turned out of their rented room, of men in town snickering about the widow and her daughter thrown into the street. "You are not a child who gets to choose anymore, Eliza," Martha said, her voice gone hoarse. "Women like us, we do not choose. We get chosen. I am only doing what poor women have always had to do." Eliza did not answer. The words sounded like a defense and a slow cut, all at once. She climbed onto the wagon by herself, without taking a hand from anyone. McCready was pleased with that cooperation. Martha stood off to the side, her own hands clenched so tight the knuckles were white. "I will send letters," Eliza said, though she was not at all sure she would have the chance. "If you have a baby, let me know," Martha answered, watching the wheels begin to turn. "So I will know. At least something of us goes on." Eliza looked at her mother one last time. In that face, where she had tried for years to find softness between all the scolding, there was only weariness now, and fear. The wagon turned toward the road and rolled out of the yard onto the red dust that led away from the town. The farther they got from Willow Pass, the lighter Eliza felt in one place and the heavier in another. Lighter because she would no longer have to listen to her mother count each coin at night. Heavier because she knew she had just been priced and sold like an animal. When they reached the curve where the rocky hills began to rise on both sides, Eliza looked toward the horizon. Far off, along the ridge of a low hill, there was a single dark speck standing against the sky. She could not tell what it was, a rock, a stump, or a person on horseback watching the road. She only knew that, in that moment, a very small, very reckless thought slipped into the numbness. If she was not Livestock, then somewhere out there had to be a place where no one could sell her like this. Eliza did not know that the figure sitting his horse up on that ridge, with black hair braided back and a strip of cloth tied around his forehead, was Nakai, an Apache who had spent years looking down on this road, watching wagon after wagon pass by. And this time, he was not only going to stand and watch. McCready's ranch sat on a bare stretch of land 2 days' ride from Willow Pass. There were no white fences, no big shade trees where anyone could rest. Just a few low sheds roofed with tin, a square main house, and the wind sliding through dry grass with a sound like old clothes rubbing together. When the wagon stopped in front of the porch, McCready slapped his hand on his knee and got to his feet. "Here," he said. "From now on, this is your home." Eliza stepped down. The ground here smelled different from town, a mix of cow dung, dust, and something older, like the scent of stories that had already happened and never been told. Inside, there were only 2 hired hands, an older Mexican woman named Rosa, her back slightly bent, and a thin young man named Sam. They looked at Eliza with curiosity, not unkind, but not exactly welcoming either. "This is Miss Hartley," McCready said, the way a man might introduce a newly bought horse. "Next month the priest will come out, say a few words, make it proper. From now on, you take orders from Rosa in the kitchen, and from me for everything else." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron and walked closer. "You know how to cook for more than just yourself?" she asked. "I know a little, but I can learn," Eliza said. "Good." "There's no time for daydreaming out here," Rosa replied, but her eyes softened just a touch when she saw the confusion in the young woman's face. In the days that followed, Eliza stayed so busy that by the time she sat on her bed at night, her body felt like it was made of lead. She was up before the sun, lighting the stove, baking bread, boiling coffee, washing clothes for the men who worked the range, mending torn shirts, peeling potatoes, scrubbing dishes. McCready did not hit her. He did not even yell much. He simply gave orders, ate, slept, and every so often asked, "You done with that yet?" There was no "thank you," no "rest a minute if you're tired." Eliza slowly understood that out here, silence was its own kind of currency. People kept it for themselves. They did not spend it on anyone else. One evening, as she carried a bucket of water out to the porch, she heard Sam talking to McCready. "Boss, the Apache have been coming closer these last few days," he said. "I saw their camp smoke on the far side of the hill. Folks say we ought to tell the fort." McCready shrugged. "This land belongs to the government, not to them," he said. "If they're smart, they won't cause trouble." "But if," Sam began. "If they come here, we have guns," McCready cut him off. "Women stay inside. Men handle the rest. That's all." Eliza stood in the shadows and heard every word. She did not know much about the Apache, only the tales the men at the boarding house used to trade, most of which sounded more like stories to scare children than anything true. She only knew that when McCready said the word "women," he did not bother to look in her direction. That night, lying on the new bed, Eliza stared up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the wind slip through the cracks. Everything here seemed solid. The roof, the sheds, the gates barred tight. Only one thing felt uncertain: her place inside all of it. Every night she heard McCready's heavy footsteps going into the room next to hers. He had not touched her, not yet. He only said, "Wait until the priest comes. I don't do anything folks could point at and call wrong. You understand?" Eliza nodded, but inside she still felt like an item on a shelf, tagged and set aside with the words, waiting to be claimed. One late afternoon, with the sun already sinking low, Rosa handed her a basket of wet clothes. "Take these to the well behind the hill. Hang them on the lines," she said. "Do not go too far. The men around here are quick to shoot and ask questions later, if they see someone they do not recognize." Eliza carried the basket out back, then followed a gentle rise that led up over a knoll. Up there, the wind was cooler. The bawling of the cattle faded, and she heard only birds and the whisper of grass rubbing against itself. She hung each shirt and pair of trousers on the line, her eyes drifting toward the horizon without meaning to. Beyond the property, past a ridge of rock, lay the land Sam had called where the Apache camp. From where she stood, Eliza could only see a few thin streams of smoke rising, dissolving into the colors of the sunset. She thought, they are probably cooking too, feeding their families. Maybe there women sat as well. Mothers, sisters, wives. Maybe there were mothers who did not sell their daughters, who never put a price on anybody's shoulders. That thought had barely taken shape when the sound of a horse's hooves cut across it. Eliza turned. At the edge of the light, where the evening shadows were starting to swallow the colors from everything, a man sat on horseback not far from her. He wore no soldier's uniform, and he was not dressed like a ranch hand. His hair was black and long, tied back, a cloth band wrapped around his forehead. His skin was darkened by the sun, his cheekbones high. He looked at her, did not reach for a gun, did not call out. For several long seconds, the two of them faced each other with only the rising wind between them. Eliza realized this was not one of McCready's men, and not anybody from town either. The man tipped his head slightly, a kind of greeting from a distance. Then he turned his horse and disappeared behind the ridge, leaving nothing but the thin line of smoke and a new, unfamiliar beat in the chest of a girl who had just been sold like stock. That night, for the first time since she had arrived at the ranch, Eliza did not dream of her mother counting coins. She dreamed of some place beyond that rocky rise, where people built fires not to tally things, but to call one another closer. In the days that followed, life on the ranch moved along in a heavy rhythm Eliza had never chosen. Morning meant starting the fire. Midday meant cooking. Afternoons were for washing. Evenings for mending. When she was too tired, she no longer had the strength to be angry at her mother. All that was left was a slow, dull emptiness, like the sound of the wind slipping through the cattle pens at midnight. McCready kept his word. He did not touch her. He only reminded her now and then. Next month, the priest will come. Once the blessing's done, everything will settle into its proper place. In his mouth, proper place meant papers signed, debts erased, and one more young woman added to the house, the way you add a new pot to the kitchen. In that kitchen, Rosa watched Eliza a little longer each day. Once, as they worked dough side by side, she asked softly, "Do you miss home, child?" Eliza's hands stopped for just a moment. "I am not sure the place I left can honestly be called home," she answered. Rosa did not pry. She only nudged the bowl of dough closer to Eliza, a small gesture standing in for the embrace she was not used to giving. News of the Apache still slipped into the supper table talk. Sam said he had seen fresh hoof prints near the creek and told them some of the young men in town were practicing their shooting, just in case there's trouble. "What does trouble mean?" Eliza asked. Sam shrugged. "They say the Apache steal horses, steal cattle," he said. "But I have never seen that with my own eyes. What I have seen is they travel in groups, with women and children. People with bad intentions don't usually bring their children along." McCready cleared his throat. "The less we think about them, the better," he said. "Our job is to keep the cattle inside the fence, not to figure out other people's business." Still, on the evenings when she went out to hang laundry, Eliza kept looking toward the ridge. Some days the smoke columns were closer, some days farther. Once in a while there was no smoke at all, only a few dark specks moving slowly against the hillside. She could not tell if they were people, horses, or simply her tired eyes playing tricks. One day, Rosa asked her to take a bundle of towels to a well farther out, where the water ran clearer. "Go before the sun drops," Rosa told her. "Do not stay till dark. That road is lonely. Only heaven knows who passes that way." Eliza nodded, slung the towels over her shoulder, and followed the path around the back. The track curved along an earthen bank, then dipped down a gentle slope. There, a small stream ran over rocks, the water cooler and cleaner than the shallow well near the house. She knelt and began to wash, her hands working while she emptied her mind. The cold water numbed a few places inside her that had burned too hot with worry. When she wrung out the last towel and lifted her head, she saw him. The man she had glimpsed at the edge of the light the other day now stood closer, on the far side of the little stream, one hand holding his horse's reins. He did not come forward, and he did not back away. He simply stood there, as if waiting to see whether she would run. Eliza stood up, her heart beating fast, but her feet did not move. "Did you lose your way?" she asked, her voice low, but not as shaky as she had expected. He tilted his head slightly. "No," he said in slow, careful English. "I am on my people's path. Your path cuts across it." His voice was not like the men in the saloon at Willow Pass, nor like the Mexican voices Eliza had heard. There was another tone in it, solid, deep, like a drum heard from far off. "You are Apache?" she asked, not knowing any better word to use. "People call us that," he answered. "My name is Nakai." He paused a beat. "You belong to that big-bellied rancher?" Eliza felt heat rise in her ears. "I do not belong to him," she said, then heard how weak that sounded, given the truth of her situation. "But I am living on his ranch." Nakai studied her for a moment longer. There was no hatred in his gaze and no cheap curiosity. He looked at her the way someone might look at a horse tied in the wrong place. "They look at you the way they look at their cattle," he said slowly. "But you do not walk with the herd." Eliza let out a small, humorless laugh. "They paid money for me," she said. "In some way, I suppose it's not so different from buying a cow." Nakai did not smile. "On the far side of that ridge," he said, "we trade too. Cattle for corn, hides for salt. But no one in our camp wears a price on their back." The wind shifted, bringing with it the smell of cook fires from his direction. Eliza caught the faint scent of roasting meat, of wood smoke, of something far better than the greasy drippings in McCready's kitchen. "Do you have a home somewhere else?" Nakai asked. Eliza looked down at her hands. "I do not think so," she said. The town I left has no place for me anymore, and this place was never really home." Nakai nodded, as if he were simply acknowledging a fact, not indulging a complaint. "Home is where, when people speak your name, they do not add a price to it," he said. Eliza stayed silent. Those words went into her slowly, but they did not leave easily. "Why do you come so close to the ranch?" she asked. "The people are afraid of the Apache." "We are afraid of the whites too," Nakai replied calmly. "Afraid they will string more wire, plant more posts, and call that law. But there is water here, and grass. We do not cross their fence line unless there is a reason." "And today, what is the reason?" He looked at her basket of wet towels, then at the blisters on her hands. "I wanted to see," he said, "if the one they bought to do the cooking still had eyes that looked straight ahead." Without meaning to, Eliza lifted her head and met his gaze. "And what do you see?" "Nakai sees someone who is not livestock," he said. "But if you stay too long, they will forget that. Maybe you will too." From the direction of the ranch, Sam's voice carried faintly over the ground. "Eliza, where are you?" She flinched and turned her head. "I have to go," she said quickly. "If they know someone is here." Nakai nodded and stepped back. "They will shoot first and ask later," he said. "I know how your boss's men act. Go." Eliza grabbed the basket and hurried up the bank. When she glanced back, Nakai had already mounted. His figure and the horses blended into the colors of dirt and stone, leaving only the thin column of smoke behind him. That night, as she washed her hands in a small basin before bed, Eliza noticed something she had not expected. Around her wrist, right where her sleeve tied, a slender red thread was looped loosely, knotted so neatly it would not fall, and yet could be slipped off in an instant. She did not remember tying it there herself. She touched it lightly, and in her mind heard again his words from that afternoon. "Home is where, when people speak your name, they do not add a price." For the first time since leaving Willow Pass, Eliza thought of the future not as a straight road leading only to the church, with a rancher waiting at the altar, but as some narrow path branching off behind that rocky ridge where someone might call her name without asking. How much? The weeks passed like the towels Eliza washed at the creek, wrung and twisted again and again until the threads wore thin. McCready talked more often about the priest's visit, about a simple ceremony, a few witnesses, sign the papers, and everything falls into place. He spoke to Sam as if he were discussing a deal, not a marriage. Next month the priest comes through, we'll have the wedding. Debt cleared, House secure, the woman properly spoken for. Every time she heard the word woman in his mouth, Eliza felt less like a person sitting at the table and more like an item listed on an inventory sheet. She still went to the far creek to wash in the quiet afternoons. A few times, Nakai appeared again on the other side of the water, always keeping just enough distance not to frighten her, yet close enough that she could not pretend he wasn't there. One day, he laid a small bag of dried leaves on a flat rock. "For the old woman in the kitchen," he said. "Unboil them and rub her back. It eases the pain." Eliza took them back to Rosa without saying exactly where they had come from. When the warm, sharp scent of the leaves drifted through the kitchen and Rosa's back stopped aching quite so fiercely, the older woman's gaze on Eliza held something softer, a quiet gratitude. On their last meeting, Nakai said quietly, "Soldiers will be riding through soon. They do not like to see our lodges in one place for too long. We'll be leaving this ridge in a few weeks. If someone wants to come along, that person has to remember they are a human being, not a piece of trade goods." That sentence kept Eliza staring at the ceiling half the night. One evening, she came back late and found McCready standing on the porch, hands on his hips. His eyes settled on the thin red thread at her wrist, faded now, but still bright against her pale skin. "What's that?" he asked. "Just thread," Eliza said as evenly as she could. "Rosa tied it there so I won't forget the towels." McCready stepped closer, took her wrist, and turned it as if he were checking a strap on a bridle. "Nobody out here needs string to remember their work," he said, his voice dropping. "My people remember with their heads, and you are my people, Eliza. I paid off your mother's debt. The whole town knows it." The words, "my people," stuck in her ears. Eliza slowly pulled her hand back. "I heard you," she said. "But hearing the same thing over and over, it starts to feel like a yoke on your neck. If you want me to be a wife, at least call my name like you're talking to a person, not like you're calling the lead cow." McCready flushed, more from surprise than shame. His fingers tightened on her wrist for a moment before he let go, muttering, "That's no way to talk to the man putting food in your mouth." Eliza did not answer. She only rubbed the place where the red thread had left a faint mark on her skin. That night in the kitchen, Rosa quietly ladled an extra spoonful of meat into Eliza's bowl. "I heard it all," she said softly. "And once, I had a mother too, and a man who said, 'I paid good money for her.'" She sighed. "There are worse things than being poor, worse things than being alone. It's when you forget you are different from the cattle in the pen." Eliza whispered, "I don't know where I'd go if not here." Rosa answered, "I don't know either, but if the day comes when you leave this place, it ought to be your choice, not the choice of a ledger book or a man's signature." When night settled, Eliza stepped out onto the porch, shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Beyond the ridge, the Apache campfires flickered, and the wind carried the smell of wood smoke and cooking, the scent of people drawing closer to one another. She slipped the red thread off her wrist, studied it a moment, then tied it to a low fence post near the corral, a spot only she would notice. A small sign for herself, a promise that it was time to do more than simply watch from a distance. Inside the house, McCready's footsteps thudded back and forth, heavy and sure. Out beyond the ridge, the Apache fires burned steady. Between those two worlds, Eliza saw for the first time that the road to the church in a wedding dress was not the only road ahead. Sooner or later, she would have to choose. To keep being called my woman, or to go in search of a place, however strange, where people called her by just one word, her own name, Eliza. The priest's visit was set for the end of the month. McCready told Sam about it the way a man might announce a date to move cattle. That day, once the ceremony's done, She takes my name and nobody in this house will have any more questions. Eliza still lit the stove and scrubbed the laundry, but in her mind, there was only one question left. If she truly was his woman, why did her heart keep turning toward the ridge? One afternoon, Rosa handed her a small cloth bag. A little dried bread, a little salt, a few coins, she said, her eyes fixed on the cutting board. I am old now. I cannot go anywhere. But if a young woman wants to leave a place that is not her home, she should not go with empty hands. Eliza's throat tightened. Rosa shook her head. Do not call me kind. I just do not want one more woman to be called by a man's name the way they call a breeding cow. If you stay, I will not blame you. If you go, remember you go for yourself, not for your mama, not for a debt, not for the labels other people have stuck on you. A week before the wedding, Eliza went to the creek early. Nakai was sitting by the bank, turning a few stones in his hand. The priest's men will be coming soon, he said. We will be leaving the ridge too. Soldiers do not like to see our lodges in one place for too long. Eliza asked, Where will you go? Toward the mountains, he said. There is no bank there, but there is water, there is wood, there are cooking fires. In that place, people call each other by name. They do not call each other by price. She looked down at her calloused hands. If someone like me wanted to go with you, what then? Nakai was quiet for a long time. I do not steal another man's wife, he said slowly. If you go, it must be because you will not accept being sold anymore, not just because our fire is warmer than his stove. We leave the night before the priest comes to the ranch. The next day, you can take the rancher's name. That night, if you want to go, all you have to do is step through the fence and climb to the ridge where we first saw each other. From there on, every step is your own. The night before the priest was due, McCready polished his best boots and told Sam to tighten the flag ropes. Eliza washed the dishes, then folded the dress that looked the most like a wedding dress among the few she owned. When the house was quiet, she lit a small lamp and laid a folded sheet of paper on the table. Her handwriting was not pretty, but the lines were straight. Martha, if this letter reaches you, I am still alive. I did not follow the man you chose. I am going to look for a place where people do not put a price on me. I do not know whether you will understand, but I hope that one day you will be a little less afraid enough that you will stop selling your own daughter. Your daughter, Eliza. She slipped the letter into her bag, then opened the cloth bundle Rosa had given her. She took only half the bread, half the salt, and a few coins. I am only borrowing a part, she whispered. The rest belongs to the woman who came before me. Then Eliza put on her coat and slipped out of the house, walking past the fence post where she had tied the red thread. The color had faded, but it still showed clearly, shivering in the wind. She untied it and wrapped it around her wrist, not as a mark of ownership, but as a reminder that she had once dared to ask who she was beyond the price other people set. When she reached the ridge, she saw Nakai waiting with a second horse beside him. He said only one thing: if you take one more step, you will not be the woman standing in church tomorrow, waiting to be claimed by a name. You will be Eliza riding with us. No one can promise this road will be easy, but it will be yours. Eliza looked back at the ranch one last time. The light in McCready's window flickered like an eye that did not know how to close. In her ears still rang the words, "My woman, we do not choose, we are chosen." She drew a deep breath and took another step, then another, until the tip of her boot touched the narrow trail that led toward the Apache camp. I do not want to be someone's anything anymore, she said, her voice soft but steady. I am Eliza. Nakai nodded and held out his hand. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and firmness of it. Not the grip of someone holding a rein, but the touch of someone helping a friend cross to the other side. They mounted and rode in silence, with only the sound of hooves, the hiss of grass against their boots, and ahead of them the Apache campfires growing brighter. Later, Eliza learned a different way to tend a fire, to tie down a lodge, to hold an Apache baby who laughed at her as if she had always belonged there. The elders called her the fair-haired daughter, and the children ran around her crying, "Eliza," with no "belonging to" added after it. When someone asked about the time before, she said only, "I was once sold like an animal. Now I am learning how to live as a person." Nakai walked beside her in his quiet way. One evening, he placed a small leather bracelet in her hand, loose without a tight clasp. "Here, bracelets are not to mark who owns whom," he told her. "They are to remind us that if one of us falls, the other will tell their story to the children." Eliza looked at the bracelet, then looked at him and kissed his cheek. It was not the kiss of a purchase grateful to its buyer. It was the kiss of a woman who, for the first time, believed she was standing inside a real family. Years later, if you rode through those mountains, you might see a small camp where dark-haired, brown-haired, and fair-haired children chased each other around the fire. A white woman, her skin browned by the sun, would be sitting and mending clothes, smiling when she heard them call out, "Mama, Eliza." If you asked her, "Where is your home?" she would point to the circle of people around the fire, to the children, to herself, and say, "Right here, in the place where no one puts a price on me, in the place where the Apache gave me the family I never really had before." In the Old West, folks were used to seeing cattle driven into pens and women pushed into arranged marriages, as if there was no other way life could go. But even in all that dust and wire, there were women like Eliza, sold off like livestock, who kept one quiet, stubborn question alive in their hearts. Don't I deserve to live like a human being? Sometimes, just holding on to that question is what lets you take that one brave step out of the pen someone else built for you. If Eliza's story touched something in you, I'd love for you to subscribe, so we can sit down together for more gentle Western stories at the end of the day.